Hello, Group E. I've had to move my filming outside because my roommates are home and they are as lovely as they are loud, and they're very lovely people. So hopefully it's not too loud out here. We'll see how this goes. Yeah, I guess this is my forum response to the discussion on assistive technology. And the first thing that I really wanted to talk about is how important I think that it is, that one article, the one that was describing what assistive technology really is, the distinction that it made between thinking of technology as gadgetry and thinking of technology as any sort of tool that can either help make our lives more convenient, but can also impede the functioning of other people or make it more difficult for certain individuals to function. I thought that was a really interesting way to think of assistive technology, and one that I hadn't really thought of before because I'm guilty of thinking of technology a lot of the time as gadgetry. But with that being said, I guess I should get to the actual questions, eh? Okay, so describe your experiences, personal and/or from practicum experience, with students who use or you believe could benefit from the use of assistive technology. Now, I'm sort of the mindset that pretty much anyone can benefit from the use of technology in some way, but also from reading the articles, I did notice that there was a distinction made between universal design for learning technology and assistive technology, and assistive technology really did seem, I might be wrong about this, I may have misread this, but it seemed like assistive technology was mainly more for students who had some sort of designation. And it was expected that these particular uses of technology would help them to function with more independence. I guess one of the examples of a success that I observed would be a particular student. I was volunteering as a TA in a classroom, and there was one particular student who was hearing impaired, and he had an earpiece that he would keep in at all times, and then he, at the beginning of each class, would go to the teacher and give her a microphone that she could just wear around her neck. It was really compact, it wasn't really that noticeable, and she would just speak directly into the microphone, and he would be able to hear everything that she was saying. And when it came to group work, all that she would have to do would take it off, would be to take it off from around her neck and then just give it to the group members that were working with them, and they would just speak into it. And in the end, it wasn't really very disruptive. It wasn't really all that noticeable, and it allowed that student to participate to a greater effect than he would have been able to otherwise. So in that sense, I would consider that a success, but the device also lost battery power more times than I can count being in that class as well, and, that was definitely a barrier that had to be, I guess, I think it was overlooked a lot of the time, and, it was a device that had to sit on a charger, and the charger was sometimes not to be found, and there were all these things that sort of seemed to come into play and to make it a little bit more difficult for that student to learn, mainly because he became very reliant on this device, and there was no other things put in place in order to support his learning with his hearing impairment. So yeah, so I think that was kind of a challenge for that particular student, and it's also something that sort of comes up in the YAT Fails paper, this idea that, relying so heavily on something that is electronically based does have its problems. One of the other things, moving away from gadgetry, one of the things that I noticed on my practicum was one particular student, great student, really strong student. He had an ADD designation, and all that he really needed, because he was quite high functioning in the classroom, all he really needed was a little bit more time to write his tests. And I didn't assign tests on my practicum, but there was another teacher who had, so he ended up coming late into my classroom and apologized and said that he'd finished up a test and he had a note, and that was fine, right? But it was something that worked really well for him, was just that few extra minutes to kind of sit down and organize his thoughts and get his thoughts out onto paper. And he just had to be kind of put off into a separate room for that as well, because he was going to be taking a little bit more time, and the disruptions would kind of disrupt his writing. So it's an example of using technology and using kind of a more enclosed space and using time as well, to be able to assist a student who otherwise would have struggled with the time constraint. So I guess, yeah, that's sort of a success that I've seen as well. Overall, I think that one of the barriers that I'm really kind of, I don't know, when it comes to assistive technology, I do feel a little bit skeptical. And part of the reason why I feel skeptical is because, you know, it's for the same reason that I feel a little skeptical about IEPs as well. I mean, there are all these things that are put in place, and all these teams that are supposed to be working really closely with students and really closely with teachers, and they're supposed to take the interests of the student into account and talk to the parents, and I have yet to actually see that. And I think the same thing can be said about the idea of assistive technology. I mean, it's been said in the papers that, you know, there's a team that should just be meeting to determine whether or not something's going to work well for a student. And I just don't necessarily know how feasible that is. I mean, I had a lot of respect for my mentor teachers, but when I asked if any of my students had IEPs, the response was, I don't think so. But at that point, I mean, really, it shouldn't have been I don't think. It should be, I know that they don't, or I know that they do. And, you know, to me, I did do my practicum in a very large school, which may have sort of come into effect there, but I also think that it's an example of something that's being said, something that, you know, is supposed to be done, like meeting with a group to put together an IEP, or meeting with a group to put together some sort of assistive technology that's going to help a student. That's said, but I don't necessarily know whether or not it happens. And I think that's my major concern when it comes to assistive technology. But at the same time, I also haven't been exposed to a lot of it as well, so I don't know. We'll see. I imagine I'll probably learn more in this course. But I guess those are my thoughts for now. So there you go.